FOS TV is brought to you by the Lion's Den. The Den always has been and always will be about enjoying family and friends in an environment steeped in Happy Valley tradition. So come back to the Den, the perfect place to recall old memories while creating new ones.
Mark Brennan with another Penn State weekly press conference wrap. Mike, it's changed from the Joe Paterno to the Tom Bradley. Been a crazy few weeks. Tom Bradley kind of settling into his groove finally, talking to the media, was able to show a little bit of sense of humor. I should introduce you first. Mike Poorman, longtime journalist, coaches the Joe Paterno class at Penn State. Has done just a lot of different things. Covered Joe probably, has interviewed Joe probably more often one-on-one than anybody. But getting back to today, Mike, Tom Bradley, what did you think of his performance there today?
God, you know, what's funny is that he answered one of your questions. He says, well, you know what I'm like. And I think a lot of people, small group of people, I counted 19 media members there, smallest of the year by far. Tommy was in his element. He was typically Tom Bradley. He was relaxed. He was funny. He was insightful. I thought he was as honest as he can be. I mean, it was fun to see.
It was nice to see this thing get back to sort of normal. And then obviously we understand why it wasn't normal for several weeks with all the controversy swirling. But he was able to, I think, just address things and show a sense of humor and not be as worried about how things were going to be perceived. I thought there was some decent information came out of it. The first thing that jumped out to me, I think it was Corey Geiger who asked him, are you interested in being considered for the full-time job? And he said, you know, absolutely. He really wants to be considered.
Yeah, that's the headline. That he actually, I was a little surprised that he came out and put that out there. I think there's no doubt that that's really his hope, but to put it out there for everyone to see, I think that is big news, and I think it shows a little bit more of a comfort level, not only with the position and the kids, but maybe a little more comfort level with the people he's dealing with. You know, Erickson and Joyner, and feeling a little more comfortable, confident about putting that out there, knowing maybe a little more what they think.
Yeah, you know, it's going to be tough for Penn State to move toward him, I think, only because of the severity of the charges and who knew what. But at the very least, you would hope that he's given an interview and a chance to speak up for himself. I think what he's done with the team so far on the field and whatnot has spoken volumes.
I like the fact that he said, I'm not coaching a position. I can go to the locker room, I can go to the classroom, I can hang out. You know, and I think that would be, and it is his style, and it's neat to hear that and see that. It's such a contrast to where Joe was at. And as I've gone through this, I think, you know, what a shame in some ways that this wasn't 4 years ago.
Yeah.
That I think he would have really, I'm not saying it in the past tense, but really things would have been so different on the field and in the locker room and even along Jay on the sideline. That was great to see last week.
Yeah, and going at these press conferences, being here every week, and I know you're here every week, with Joe, it was really a wrestling match, I think is the way Neil Rudell put it. Every time you asked a question, and it could be the most basic question, everything was adversarial, and you know, I'm not sure if that was, had he been like that for all those years? I'm trying to remember. I think it got worse the last few years, that every single question was a wrestling match. And I don't mean this as a woe is me for the media thing, but it is kind of refreshing to have somebody in there who engages you in a question and doesn't take offense at everything that's asked.
No, it was worse than going to the dentist, and obviously for everyone. I mean, Joe, even back in the 70s, Joe would always try to vet you or find out what you're really asking or whatnot, but I think over the years it's certainly changed to where, you know, it might have been 10% of it to now it was, you know, at the end it was 90% of it.
So you know, we talked about some of the headlines. What are some of the other things that may have jumped out to you, Mike, about this press conference today?
Well, I think the fact that, you know, what was really interesting for Tom, when you talked about Nebraska, he knew every player. He knew every player by name. He knew their numbers. I mean, he's obviously scouted these guys. He's seen all the tape. Like, he's into it. He knows what's going on, and I think that's somewhat of a stark contrast in the past. Is that, you know, Tom? This is Tommy's existence.
Yeah, he's not saying I only know numbers. He's giving out names. He's giving out stats. He's giving out national rankings. It's like bam, 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 bam.
God, and you know, that's kind of in a certain way, whether you're a fan or media, it's exciting to see that this guy is really taking this job seriously, and again, it's just the contrast is just so overwhelming.
Yeah, Tom Bradley obviously painting Nebraska as an outstanding team, which it is. And speaking of those numbers, just when you go over how unbelievable Wilson has been at quarterback, they have a great running game. It's interesting to hear him break these things down. Again, we're comparing a lot between Joe and Tom Bradley, but I think that's a natural thing. But really, to get into the details and to paint, rather than just saying this is a good, solid team or this may be the best team we've faced all year, he's really backing it up and supporting it with facts.
Yeah, and I think we can take a look into the locker room a little bit, and it is a contrast to what they were used to. So in that sense, it's been a long year. It's a long year even if nothing happens. So for these guys, that has to be a little energizing, a shifting of gears, an excitement, more energy. I think for them, that's really important as it gives them an extra oomph, makes them more focused.
Now, I will say it was interesting. GoPSUSports.com, Penn State's site, had a video inside the Penn State locker room after the Ohio State game, and it was up for, I think, a day and a half. And that came down, and I don't get it because to me, it was giving you a unique insight, and I don't think there was anything negative. I'm sure you saw the video.
I saw it when Tommy was talking to the guys, and I think it's part and parcel of what he said here and before. He's not a notes guy. He speaks what he says what he thinks, and you know him almost as well as anybody, certainly on the beat, and he doesn't have a big filter. And I think those type of things, I think when we look in retrospect, the past several years, it would have been a really good thing for the program, and that something wasn't going to happen with Joe, and it certainly doesn't change the standards, but there's a new excitement, and I think it's important for Penn State to show as much transparency and to believe that and live that every single day.
Now, one of the things, maybe we shouldn't read between the lines, but that's what we do. He was asked about some of the players, Farah, Stephon Green, who began the season in Joe's doghouse, and he basically said everybody began with a clean slate. And I'm not putting words in his mouth, but I'm going to read between the lines and think that maybe he figured some of the punishments that these guys got weren't necessarily fair, especially with a guy like Stephon Green who, purchase of alcohol for a minor. There was allegedly something else, but the fact that he went back to these guys, well, Joe had obviously gone back to Farah much earlier and to Green to a lesser extent, but Tom Bradley has really implemented Green. I think it's good that he's given somewhat of a clean slate to some of these guys because, you know what, when you look at some of the alleged offenses of different people and the inactions of people that you could be much more critical of, these players probably look at that and say, well, geez, I'm being held out for half a season for buying beer for a kid. I think it's good that he gave that clean slate.
Well, I think it was a smart move for any number of reasons. But first of all, to say I'm my own man. Joe may have done things these ways, and obviously and Tommy has been as loyal assistant on and off the record as you could ever hear. But it's his show, and I think he had to show those guys, this is it. This is me. I'm totally different. I'm going to be, this is my show, and what past is prologue, what Shakespeare said, and we're going to move forward. And I think that again, that's another way the team is being re-energized. So they've gotten a lot of energy in different directions from this, and I believe them today when they say, you know what, we're united. We're not thinking about all that stuff because I think when they go in there, it's a different atmosphere, and it's kind of that new energy, and I think that's going to serve them well.
Stories floating around about Bulls may or may not want Penn State, or how far will they fall. The players basically said, listen, no matter, from what I'm getting, and maybe I'm reading it wrong, but they seem like, first of all, they're like, we're not worried about that right now, but I'm getting the sense that they're going to go bowling whoever asks. I think they really want to do it. You only have so many games in your life, and why not?
Oh, of course they want to go. And I think when Erickson has said, President Erickson, we want to go. Tommy has said on the record, we want to go. So those two people are the ones that decide. I think Joyner has said on Friday or Saturday that he wants to go. So as much as the national discussion may be that Penn State's not going bowling, everyone at Penn State says we want to go, and the two you listen to are Erickson and Joyner.
Yeah, the other national story that's coming out today, Wall Street Journal, USA Today, documenting instances where it seemed like Joe was trying to, I don't know if the cover-up's the right word, but exert his influence more in disciplinary matters than maybe the university had hoped. I don't think any of that really comes as a surprise to people who have been covering the program. Maybe at a national level that is, but we really knew a lot of that, and I think a lot of that was public record. It's not as if we knew it behind the scenes.
No, I think, for anyone who's been around or covering the program, is certainly not covering up the information around the program, but most of that was not news. But when you frame it with everything else, it shows that, oh my God, Joe's kind of dictatorial, Curly's a little afraid of him, Spanier doesn't want to touch it, and he pushes what he can for the football players. It's like, well, that's 1970 stuff. That's right. 1980 stuff. That's not new. That's news to the nation, but that's been status quo for Joe for decades.
And I think the point that was missed, and I hate to come across as being negative toward the Wall Street Journal or USA Today, if you were going to make an argument, to me, it would be, how does somebody who is so micromanaging every little aspect of it, when a Jerry Sandusky thing comes, kicks it up and says, well, I don't want to worry about that. And to me, as I look at that, I thought there was a context there that they could have added that was missing.
Yeah, they didn't connect the dots there. I mean, maybe they're thinking that at this point they can't. And also with these type of things, you have to decide whether information is going to come out bit by bit, or whether you want to try to put a couple of the pieces of the puzzle together. And I think, they don't quite have that context or see what you saw, that it may be pretty obvious that way. They're very step-to-step oriented. What story can I have now? And eventually, the smart people will put all those pieces together of everything, and you'll get an overall picture.
Now, before we wrap up, anything else from the press conference that I missed that you think jumped out that needs to be mentioned?
Well, I thought it was kind of the players were kind of nonchalant about it, but I believe it. It's like, this is going on the outside. We got a football game to play. We're not paying a lot of attention to it, and I believe that's very genuine for these guys. That with everything that's happened doesn't involve them, and this week they're hanging out together. If you read Twitter, they're all Xbox and they're doing everything. A couple of them are studying maybe. So in that sense, for these guys, I don't think they're thinking about the Wall Street Journal. I think they're thinking about Russell Wilson.
Yeah, Tom Bradley said he's taking the team to a movie and joking about the NCAA allowing them to buy popcorn and sodas, but that'll be a trip. They're renting out. I mean, he was being serious there, wasn't he? They're renting out a whole theater, and they're going to be able to sit there and watch a movie together.
Yeah, I think that's typically Tommy, that they'll do a field trip like that, and it'll bring the guys together. But it was kind of neat to hear them say, and I think they were genuine. You try to vet these things, but that they couldn't get closer because they are already close. And if you go back to even whether it's Joe's injury and then the quarterback thing, it's like these guys have been freaking hammered all over the place, and they're still standing.
Yeah, and the one point I've made, the one real disappointment is that this program has been so micromanaged in terms of what information the players get. And when all this big stuff happens, when the announcement that Joe retires, they have to, there's a press release put out by the Paternos, and before the players hear about it. The thing with Joe's cancer, there's a press release put out by the family, and your heart goes out to him and the family.
Sure.
But it's too bad that the players have to hear about this through social media. And that's an editorial comment on my part, but I think that's been very poorly handled. These guys have been through a lot, and I think they deserve much better than that sort of treatment.
No, I think so, and I talked to some players a couple weeks ago, on the record, and even back in March when Sarah Gannam's story said, no one talked about it, no one addressed it, and I think all along, these are all teachable moments. These are kids. You and I deal with them. I teach them. It's like they may be famous, but they're still kids, and they need communicated, and they need to understand what's going on, and I think Tommy's doing that now, but that wasn't the case, and it's incredible how they've just marched forward.
One of the fun parts of doing the stand-up here is that we do it outside of the media room, and we have all sorts of people making noise and stuff, but that's half the fun of it. Hey, I know I always mess up the name of the class, so tell me that Joe Paterno and the media, what is it?
Joe Paterno, Communications and the Media, and it's more relevant than the day we started, but a quick aside on that. The second week of the class, we addressed the Outside the Lines pizza on all the fight and the criminal charges and brought in Steve Delson from Outside the Lines. So it's a very interesting bookend right now for a 4-year course.
How many years have you been doing it? 4 years?
4 years, yeah. So it's the two biggest quote-unquote scandals in Penn State history. We started the course with that, and we may end the course with that.
I know you're a Penn State grad. You still teach at the university, obviously. I'm sure there are a lot of emotions, but how much does it suck for you that class is no longer going to be around? And I know there are much bigger issues that people are worried about, but I have to assume you had some fun, and it was probably a challenge, and it must have been an interesting 4-year run for you.
I mean, it's been great, and it's because of people like you. When we have someone who comes in and talks about the web, who's much more knowledgeable, and it's somewhat of a misnomer about Joe is really a way to talk about media and changes in branding, and the practical applications the past few weeks have just been amazing. So my hope is that it may not be Joe Paterno Communications and Media, but it's a learning tool that we can use to real life example right here for the kids to make something good out of what's been a horrible situation. So I'm hopeful that in some iteration, this will return next fall.
Yeah, it would be fun to see it keep going, because I do think a lot of aspiring young journalists and just students in general were able to pull a lot out of it. Mike Poorman, I appreciate you joining us.
Thanks, Mark. Great to be asked.
Yeah, and I want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. I know it's been a crazy couple of weeks for Penn State fans, but enjoy yourself this holiday weekend and get ready for a big game at Wisconsin. Are we going to be back doing a show next week? Not sure. We're going to have to see what happens out in Madison. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.